Just hey everybody. Let me just double check to make sure this is working. Still kind of getting used to this YouTube thing. I think we're good here. Perfect. Okay, we're good. All right, welcome everybody. Welcome to this Monday episode of Crypto with Chris. Yeah, sorry about last Thursday. Just was a bit under the weather and wasn't up for it, but I'm good to go now and looking forward to this. We've had a lot of crazy price action over the last week, and there's a lot to talk about today. There's some mostly bullish stuff, but there's a couple things I think in the short term, some headwinds that I want to talk about, and we'll see what that looks like. We'll get into that, but yeah, all right. Let's see what we got here. It's crazy. The weather has totally turned. It's sweater and flannel weather now where I live. So it's been cold and rainy today. But I'm into this. So I want to talk about. Let's look at the weekly here so far. I know in the last show I was talking about this resistance level here that had formed on this candle body. And I knew that if we got anywhere close to it, it was gonna provide heavy resistance. And sure enough, we just slammed into it like a brick wall. Basically, it came up and it hit it exactly. Like I know on Coinbase, I was watching, and it hit exactly at 30,000 or 35,000 rather, and just boom, done. And sort of there it sat since then. So let's kind of look at that on the weekly level. I think what we're going to see, after a big run up like this, you either see a couple different things. You either see one, it retrace immediately, or we're going to see basically the moving averages kind of catch up to it. It's going to go sideways, just kind of like these runs have. Yes, this one sort of petered out. This one eventually petered out, but it did go sideways mostly. Okay. So yeah, I think we're going to probably see some sideways price action. There's a couple things I'm concerned about though. One of the things is the weekly RSI. The weekly RSI is, well, it's getting up to the higher side. It's pushing 70. It's a bit overcooked. Yes, obviously it can go way, way above that, in the height of like a bull, like a blow off top. But typically when you see weekly RSI pushing the tops of these, you're going to get a bounce. And so that's one thing that I'm a little bit wary of. I do think that in general, across the board, things got a little bit overheated in the last week. And so I would not be surprised to see some kind of a correction, whether that's, I think it's probably better illustrated on the daily level, whether that means you see like a mean reversion, essentially, just like a technical mean reversion, not necessarily we're going to crash, it's going to retrace, but either you'll see something like this 20-day moving average kind of slowly make its way up and just sort of catch up to it. And that can be a mean reversion too. And meanwhile, you'll see price basically just go sideways and just kind of let the market sort of take a deep breath and catch up and cool off. And so that's kind of my base case. Obviously, sure, you can come back down. Now, if we did come back down, what would I be looking for? Well, we've got a couple different levels here. We've got the breakout level, the previous yearly high, which is at 31.8, or we could kind of come back down into this range here that we had illustrated that was based on weekly candles. Either one of these are realistic. First of all, I'd be looking for it to come back and bounce off this level here, kind of retrace this and sort of flip this previous yearly high to support. That would be the most bullish scenario, I think, outside of it just going sideways, obviously, but coming down and bouncing off this. If we come back down and it kind of breaks down below this level and gets back into this channel again, one, it's not going to be the end of the world because, we've got weeks, if not months, until an ETF approval. And I feel like there's going to be some level of apathy that will set in that could eventually see that, whether we just slowly sort of trickle down to that, between here and this green line, or, something like that. I don't know that I see a big retrace. I feel like just the market sentiment has kicked up enough and things are running hot right now and people are into crypto. Certainly the people that are in the space anyway, but I feel like it's catching on more and more. The sentiment is creeping up. A couple other things I'm seeing that I think are really positive developments are like this bull market support band here, the band that you see. not only has it ticked upwards to a stronger degree, but we're starting to see the green catch up to it. And if we look at like here, let me put this on the week. I've got this graph here that basically is a representation of the spread between those two moving averages. And you can see it's drastically catching up to it. It's closing that divergence here, like big time. And it's definitely a bullish sign when you see the green line trading above the red line. That just typically means that we're in an overall uptrend in general, or we're pivoting to an uptrend. I mean, sometimes this can cross over well before the trend reverses actually, but it's just a positive development. It's sort of a step in the right direction, as I like to say. And then also separately from that, like if you get rid of that and look at just the 10 and the 20-day moving average, we're seeing something very similar, or a week moving average rather. We're seeing something very similar where this is closing that gap. They're both flipped up back to the upside, which is a really positive development too. And we're starting to see, a crossover about to happen here. So all of that's good. All of that's saying that, generally things are reversing on a technical level, on a weekly technical level, which is what you want to see. That's kind of the sort of gold standard for a larger trend. And so this is all a good sign. Kind of along those same lines, this is talking about the death cross we had a while back. It's basically already gone and done. We had the death cross, what was it, back in September, and boom, golden cross already today. So that was very, very, very short-lived death cross, probably shorter than some that we've seen in a while. Yeah, maybe this one here from COVID, but that's also a really good sign to see that. So, I mean, yes, it's only one day. Yes, it just happened just now, but like, I like that. That means we're probably not going to see this big 26% drop. Also, if we kind of come over to this other chart that I had drawn a while back, talking about the breakdowns that we get when Bitcoin breaks down below the 20-week moving average. So far anyway, this is looking like it's going to be the shortest one on record, with only being a 21, almost 22% correction, which kind of makes sense given that, unlike most of the previous ones we've had, it was not way overextended above the moving average to begin with. It was kind of almost, running parallel with it right up to it when it finally broke down. So there wasn't as much momentum. There wasn't as much of a reset that needed to take place, is ultimately kind of what I'm kind of explaining that out to be, I think. And so, yeah, it just didn't need to correct as far. And, then we got the catalyst. Granted, were it not for that fake news pump, I don't know that we would have had this, but nevertheless, we got it. And so that's the situation. Looking at it just from like these divergence flags, for example, they're not really doing much. I don't know that this means anything. I mean, again, this, there's plenty of ones all over, and that's often not a huge deal, especially on a daily level. On a weekly level, we do have, I think, one forming, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, it's actually getting a little bit bigger now. Okay, well, it's funny. Earlier today, this was a 1, and it wasn't much of anything, but this is sort of an interesting development. Obviously, we had this one back here that ultimately resulted in a pretty good downtrend, a pretty good trend reversal. It's tricky because we had such an overextended pump to begin with. This is a little bit different of a scenario because we were still within the bands, within the range. We weren't too overextended. A mean reversion wasn't a huge deal. Right now basically a mean reversion on the weekly level would put us all the way back to the 28K level, 29K level, which is pretty drastic. And I don't know that I see us doing that. I mean, this could, I'm not going to ignore this because I ignored this one at my peril last time. And this is certainly much more of a stronger signal than even this one was on a weekly time frame. But my point being, you have to take the rest of the context into place too. And right now, of course, we're going to see this because of how overextended we are. So again, I would not be surprised to see a few things. One, either we come back down to this level, maybe this level, or we just kind of go sideways, or we kind of just bleed out a little bit and kind of just peter down. eventually coming back down to this level and letting the moving averages catch up to this. When you see something like this, this doesn't necessarily mean the bottom's going to fall out. It doesn't even imply that this is going to happen, when this printed here. It just means that momentum is slowing. And of course, that's what we're seeing, momentum slowing. We're seeing momentum slowing that's sort of counter to what the price action is indicating. And so we're seeing divergences in momentum indications. Simply all this is saying. That could, yes, maybe that just means we kind of roll over. So I'm not going to say this means sell and get out of everything now. But I'm also not surprised to see that. I was kind of expecting something like this. Prior to this candle breaking through here, we actually had, a one forming already here. And then this candle blew up. And so it's like, of course you're going to see this. Of course you're going to see everything needing to kind of stop and take a deep breath. And I think that that's what this is saying here. So maybe we don't, I don't think we punch through this 35K level right away. I think that it's got a minute to kind of hold off, like I said, and sort of the space needs to catch its collective breath. We've seen a lot of alts come through in the last week and really run hot too, which we'll get into in a minute. And a lot of those have caught up to this too. So that's all we're going to see. I think we're just going to see a slowdown, a temporary slowdown. Of course, anything could happen. There's lots of stuff news-wise coming out in regards to the ETFs that are, slowly trickling out. We've seen other ETF applicants outside of BlackRock release their amended filings and make those public. Other companies have said that they too will be building up their seed funds, seeding their funds, which again doesn't mean they're going to go buy 1 million Bitcoin, but it does mean that they're going to be buying some. So, that's just kind of something to keep in mind. Also, we've got a lot of economic data coming out. Oops. Thanks, Steph. I just saw your message. Anyway, so I don't know that we're going to blow past through this, but we'll see. It's going to depend on the economic data that's coming out throughout the week, which some of it's pretty big. I'm not going to get too much into that right now. We'll kind of see what that looks like on Thursday. But for now, let's kind of look at some other charts here. I know I touched on alts pumping, so let's see what that looks like. ETH actually is one that has really kind of taken a bit of a reversal. It's hit a bottom. I wanted to talk about the ETH Bitcoin pair specifically because kind of like we were talking about weekly RSIs on the ETH Bitcoin pair, it's actually below 30. It's actually bottomed out. So that's interesting. I think ETH is going to probably reverse. It's kind of come down here to this range here. It's broken through the bottom of this channel here. So ETH, I think, maybe, yes, it could come down a little bit more, of course, but I think we're going to see a bit of a technical reversal on ETH. Now, there's a couple things to think about here. One, I fundamentally, there's nothing has changed with ETH. The narrative hasn't really changed with ETH. So if this did reverse, it would just be more of like a technical reversal, like a sentiment reversal, just kind of an oversold type scenario where it just sort of needs to mean revert again. Maybe that means it only comes back up here and, continues down. But I think it's oversold, at least in the short term, at the very least. But all that is kind of, again, contingent on how Bitcoin is doing. And if these ETF announcements come out, then it doesn't matter what's happening here. This could blow down even more. And it really doesn't matter because there's nothing actually driving this bottoming here from an ETH standpoint. This is really only from a Bitcoin standpoint, and probably more so from a Bitcoin blew up and got way overextended. And so now all the alts are sort of just catching up to it. And that's kind of what we're going to see in a lot of these other charts too. And so that's really sort of all that's happening here. This is much more a statement about Bitcoin than it is about ETH, I think. So I think just keep that in mind. That's not to say ETH can't run up a little bit, but don't maybe go headlong into ETH just yet. Solana's another one, although Solana actually looks pretty strong. And I left these up for a second just to kind of touch on these RSIs, these weekly RSIs, because they're getting high, but they're not quite as overcooked as, and especially against Bitcoin, it's even less so. It's still got more room to run. So, let's look at what that looks like from a price standpoint here. Both of these charts, both the USD pair and the Bitcoin pair on Solana, I think look really good. Let's talk about the dollar pair for just a second. So what I'm going to be looking for here, it's come up into the middle of the range. It's actually tagged the middle and punched above it a little bit here. And so that's this week is going to be, does it hold this as support? Does it get rejected by this and come back down to the bottom? Or does it make another run up to the top of this range? With Solana specifically, I'm inclined to think that, the chances are pretty good that it could come up to the top of this range. Fundamentally, it's got a lot going for it right now. There's a lot of new developments coming out even just in the last week and continuing to, and there's just a lot of kind of positive sentiment from a fundamental standpoint with this project right now. And so I would not be surprised to see this, kind of continue to run up a little bit. And then if we look at the Bitcoin pair, it's similar. It's actually punched up above its middle already, come down, tapped it as support. So it's sort of flipped the middle as support, and it's already on its way up to the top of this range. So this is looking even better from a Bitcoin standpoint. And so it'll be interesting to see if it does make it up to the top of this range, if it breaks out through. I think there's a chance it actually could, start to break through and outperform Bitcoin on a larger, higher time frame. So I'm going to be really curious to see what happens once it starts getting up into this range here. Does it bounce? Does it continue this strength that it's showing? I honestly, I really would like to see that happen. So I'll be really curious. But what I'm looking for, obviously, is now that it's up past the middle of this range, it needs to hold this, and it needs to stay in here for sure. It needs to hold this middle as support. And again, I'd like to see it punch through. Look at BitTensor for a second. BitTensor had a crazy week. So yeah, it was looking like it was barely gonna. Oops, wrong chart. Let me flip. Nope, wrong button. Second. Here's my drawings. Okay. So I had drawn this range here based on weekly candle bodies, and it was coming down here, and I was like, is this going to bounce? Is this going to hold? I really don't know. It didn't look, because it hadn't looked good for like several days in a row, and it had been just kind of, it had been sort of coming down and bouncing off the bottom of this range and coming up to the bull market support band and just getting rejected by it each time, for several weeks in a row now. And then it was kind of just really, eking back down here. Notice the green had flipped back down below the red. And I was really just wondering if it was going to hold this as support, and it did bounce, and it got a pretty good bullish divergence flag come off of that. But then supposedly, rumor has it, some whale came in and bought something like 200,000 Tau tokens or something like that, and just blew this up. And so that's kind of crazy. Now it's back up to the top of this range. It actually came up and has nicked it 3 times now. And I think it's definitely cooked. Certainly on a daily RSI level, it's way, way, way overbought, and needs to kind of cool off. So looking at this, I feel like this is a perfect example of one that is due for a bit of a breather for sure. Now, what does that mean? I don't know. It's way, way overextended. A mean reversion would put it back down at $57. Who knows? The bull market support band is at 60. The middle of this range is at 62. So I don't know. I don't know what we're going to see here. Something like this with this small of a market cap, it's anybody's guess. But it does seem to be, following technicals pretty good at this point. So I don't know. We'll see. Maybe it'll just keep going. It's definitely got a lot of sentiment. They're doing some really, really cool stuff behind the scenes with this project. Lots of new developments, lots of new subnets coming online with new things and improvements. And I feel like it's getting more play. I'm seeing it more on Twitter. So I'm bullish on this project overall. I think it's a great thing that the space needs, but it's certainly overcooked. It's certainly overcooked on a daily level and needs a bit of a reset. So we'll see what that looks like. This one is interesting. So 0x0.ai, it had this breakout. So it had a previous high, it broke out, turned around. Oh, this is on the weekly level, basically retested it, flipped it to support, and it's just been pumping. Now, this is one that I was curious about because if you look at it on the daily, it had basically just been going sideways more or less for I mean, several months, going back all the way to May. And so, oh, let me change this. Put that at the daily. So yeah, so I had been waiting for this to break out and kind of get into more of like a price discovery phase, and it did. I mean, well, it's interesting now. If you look at this on the daily level, I had this line in a bit lower than it should have been. So it still looks bullish. Obviously, it still has broken out. It still has basically retested this, but it's just sitting here on this line now. So it's kind of flipped this line to support the previous high. It's flipped it to support. But we're seeing some good things in terms of the moving averages. Both the moving averages, like we were kind of heading for a crossover on the 10-day moving average, but now it's flipped back upwards. And same thing, we got the green, the 21 week exponential moving average on the bull market support band has flipped to the upside of the red. So that's another bullish development. So structurally, this is still showing a lot of strength, both on a weekly and on a daily level. So if it breaks down below this line, that's not a great look, but also it wouldn't be terrible because it is a bit overextended, above the support band. RSI wise, it's cooled off a little bit, but it's got a little bit of a room to reset. So like, even if it did come back down and bounced off this, that wouldn't be the end of the world. I think I would really only start to get concerned once it starts breaking below all of these moving averages here. So this is kind of this cluster here of all these different moving averages. If we look at them, we've got the 21-day or 21-week exponential, the 20-week simple moving average. We've got the 100-day and the 200-day. And so all of these are kind of right in line with each other right now. Just saw your comment, Stefan. Yeah, I'll get to OK or 0K in a second. So yeah, but this looks good. I mean, even if it comes back down to here, I'm not going to be too worried. If it blows back through this though and loses all of this cluster, then that's a bad sign. Especially since we've got this kind of generally trending upwards, higher highs and higher lows sort of bouncing price action that we've seen, and it's come up and it's sort of again flipped this previous high to support now. So hopefully it stays and it's not just kind of a false break. If we look at it back on a weekly level, we're into the fourth week really. Yes, it closed below this line now that I kind of revised it. So it bounced off this, closed below it, but then shot back above it, closed above it, and here we are now. So we shall see. Granted, this is a smaller project, smaller market cap, but it's still fun to watch. But it's going to move, I guess is what I meant to say. All right. So Injective, this is another one that I'm really paying a lot of attention to. Also a little bit overcooked, both the Bitcoin pair and the USD pair. Like if we look at look at the RSI. Yeah, we're way above 70, probably on both of them, if I'm not mistaken. So this one had a really strong last couple of weeks, and it's kind of one of those that's due for a bit of a reset, due for a breather. But let's take a look at it. Yeah, we've got major on the week. So this is the weekly time frame for both of these. We've got major bearish divergence. We've got sell signals kicking up on both of them. You maybe can't see it, but sell signal here, sell signal here. It's kind of behind this. Six divergences on the USD pair, 7 on the Bitcoin pair. So not going to be at all surprised to see a full mean reversion on this, back down to on the Bitcoin, or I'm sorry, on the USD pair, probably back down to $8. And then 2,800 sats or so here. So it's probably would not be surprised to see it basically retrace most of last week. And that would be okay. It would put it back down, kind of back into this range here that we're seeing. But that's okay. It still is really strong. It kind of like the last chart we looked at. What we don't want to see is it closing below these moving averages on the weekly. But coming back down and touching them, especially after such a big week that it had last week, that's fine. That's normal. Obviously, best case scenario, it just keeps pushing or goes sideways and lets these moving averages catch up to it, which obviously would be great. but this is one that, I've been slowly kind of DCAing into this. I think it's cooked. I think it's on the weekly level. These are very strong reversal indicators. So if you were thinking of jumping into this one, I personally would hold off for a minute and let the dust settle on these indicators and see what happens next. Caspa's another one here that is kind of a little bit ahead, I think, in terms of its correction. It's coming back down. It's already back at sort of the center. It's doing its mean reversion against Bitcoin. I feel like it's lost a little bit of steam in the last few weeks, but it hasn't been just as outsized as some of these other ones. But still, I think it looks really good. Yeah, it's down today, but it had, on the USD pair anyway, it's had 2 pretty decent weeks, and it's also just kind of holding this sideways range that it's been in. And on the USD pair, it's got a little bit to dip. But again, in like I've said a ton, is in this time in the cycle, it's like, yeah, look at the USD pair, but make your decisions based on the Bitcoin pair. And right now the Bitcoin pair is getting back down to its basically its support level, its bull market support band. Now it did kind of go through it a little bit here and reverse. And so again, because it's like a small cap, kind of micro cap alt, you got to give it some room, and you got to just know that it's gonna go all over the place. But if we get something that looks like this here again, and it kind of keeps going after 2 or 3 weeks, or kind of continues pushing down bigger, that's something to pay attention to, and you might want to get out of that. Rio. Oh my God. This is the one that's been going crazy. So this is Zero Knowledge Network. This one has been like so this is a daily chart, but it looks like a weekly chart. And like, I swear I've been watching this, paying really close attention to this for going on like, almost 2 weeks now. And, we've been seeing these crazy gains. Like, look at these. I'll just kind of call some of these out. So this day up 41%, this day up 41%, this day up 50%, this day up 26%, this day up 23%, even yesterday up 6%. So yeah, we've had a couple of red candles here and there, but just mega outsized gains on the daily. And it basically set a new high. Granted, what is this? It's barely a month and a half old. So, and it's barely a 10 or 11 or $12 million market cap. So it's not anything. It's as micro as degen as it possibly can get. But it's like, these are the kind of charts you want to look for in the early days of these kinds of projects. These sort of new shiny objects that come along in the crypto space at this time in the cycle. These are the ones that, sometimes you see projects like this, that like have, these are the ones that'll do 100x. I'm not saying this one's doing 100x. Don't get me wrong, but like, this is the kind of thing that you would look for. And so, yeah, I like this. It kind of did this night, it pumped up out of the gate. It took a minute to kind of just settle down and catch its breath. And then it's just a slow, steady series of just big double-digit gains every day. Now, obviously, this can't continue forever, but I like this because it's not super spiky. It's not like 2xing in a day and then dropping 100% the next day and doing this crazy action like some of these other ones. And so, I'll take this type of steady upticks. Granted, they're, still double-digit gains. This is a nice, healthy looking chart in that sense. And so, this is one that I'm paying attention to, and this is a pretty hot chart. Obviously it's due for a bit of a reset. I mean, we've had, several days in a row of double-digit gains, with very few little resets here and there. But also, again, it's only a $10 million market cap, so. One person could tank this or double it in an hour, and it's hard to even do TA with something like this because, again, one person can completely control the whole situation. So nevertheless, it's a good chart. I can't really do much TA on it because it's not even there's not even a weekly, like the weekly doesn't even do anything. It's just like what, so yeah, it's kind of a cup and handle sort of thing happening, but it doesn't even really have a handle necessarily. It's like a cup that just sort of kept going. But it's not even big enough to have like a bull market support band. There's not enough weeks to have weekly moving averages yet even. So it's just kind of a silly chart, but nevertheless on the daily, it's a nice looking chart, and it's been fun to watch. So I'm just going to stay with that. You can't get too deep with it otherwise. This is another one, although it's a bit bigger, but this is another one that's been pretty interesting too. Right out of the gate, nice. This is what you want to see. With a new alt is not. You don't want to see a lot of times when new alts launch, you get either a massive green spike and then it just bleeds out for weeks, or you kind of get the opposite. Or it goes up and just goes sideways and then kind of bleeds out, kind of like this. Where is this one here? This stupid thing. No, not Lido. This dumb, Unibot blew up. Like it started at, what was it, $9, and by the end of the week it was at 50, and then it's gone up to as high as, what is this, 250, and then it's just been basically bleeding out since then. Obviously, this isn't the kind of chart you want to see. You want to see the opposite of that. You want to see just like a slow, steady rise. This is a nice, slow, steady rise right out of the gate. Also, new shiny object, new project, hasn't been through a bear cycle yet, doesn't have baggage. These are kind of the low microcap alt charts that I'm looking for. Ones that are holding their bull market support band, ones that are staying above their 10-week moving average, both against Bitcoin and USD. And I think this is a good looking chart here. And even today, it's up 6.5%. Meanwhile, the rest of the market doesn't look super hot. I mean, Bitcoin's basically flat. There's a lot of alts that are down. Zero Knowledge, kind of like I said, after having crazy mega days in a row, it's down 18% today. I didn't realize that. Where'd it go? Yeah. Well, whatever. It kind of needs an 18% down day. You're going to get that after having several, 20, 30, 50% days in a row. But nevertheless, I think this is a good looking chart. And this is one that I'm paying attention to also. So these are constructive alt charts. And all this is interesting to me because what I want to touch on next is, like I've shown, a handful of really solid looking, steadily growing alt charts. Most of them are very small microcaps, I admit. But then you've got a couple like Solana that is doing very well, like Injective Protocol also doing very well. Injective's not a small project. It's a top 50 microcap. It's a decent sized project, and it's well outpacing Bitcoin and has been well outpacing Bitcoin for the entire year. And so when we go and look at dominance here, like I'll touch on this one first. When we look at Bitcoin dominance, yes, Bitcoin dominance is pumping pretty good. It's way outpacing. This is telling you that by and large, the majority of the altcoin market is not doing well, is going down against Bitcoin. Ethereum being probably the primary driver of this, honestly, of I think this number going up is as much a reflection of this number going down as it is any of the rest of the market. But like the rest of the alts, I think it's worth paying attention to. And so I wanted to look at this chart here. So this is that same, this bottom line here, this alt line. So this is the same chart here. This is what we're looking at just with candles instead of line chart. But the last show I did, I remember setting an alert here somewhere in here. It was like the previous, or maybe it was here. And I was like, I think, I'm going to be paying attention to this others chart setting a new higher high. And I remember setting an alert here, and I was like, alert me when this alt chart sets a new higher high. And it did later that same day. That alert triggered and it pumped up and set a new higher high. So this is a reflection of, some of these other charts that we're looking at. And I think this is worth paying attention to because, this is slowly on an uptrend now. I mean, yes, we've had a higher lows here, and then we've got kind of a series of slightly higher highs and higher lows here, but we still hadn't kind of punched up above this previous high that we had set back in February, when a lot of alts pumped right out of the gate to start the year, which we saw here, and that kind of leveled off in February, and most of the alts that I was paying attention to, like an example of that is like a good example of that is this Stacks was one of those that just crazy pumped out of the year and then hit, late February, early March, and it's just bled out against Bitcoin ever since then. And a lot of alts did that. And that's what we saw here. Basically, they just bled out. But I think, that's looking like maybe it's kind of bottomed. It definitely didn't set a lower low from the end of the bear market, back in 22. It recovered here. It set a bottom, and it's kind of set a series of higher highs and higher lows. It's continued to hold the bull market support band, and now it's set a new higher high a new high for the year, basically. And I think this is really noteworthy. I think that this is why I'm paying attention to some of these alt charts. And I know, back in this period, going back in August and September, I was saying now is not the time for alts. Now is not the time for alts. And I wasn't wrong, but this is what you want to see. This is when you go, oh, ding, 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 light bulb on. It's time to pay attention now. When alts start setting new yearly highs, in terms of dominance against the rest of the market. And so, does that mean, I don't know if that means, that what we're seeing here is basically the start of this kind of mega alt run that we saw, like here, like if I draw this line, wait, that's not going to work. Give me like this bit here that, from here to here. I don't know if that's what we're seeing. But again, my point here is that once alts go, they'll run. And it's like, this is where you get these sort of life-changing, 100x type gains, is buying low at the beginning of cycles and holding on until ends of cycles and stuff like that. And so, sure, you don't want to buy too early, but also, just kind of slowly start thinking about that. Slowly, now's the time to be, again, evaluating charts, looking for charts that are doing well against Bitcoin, that are holding their bull market support band against Bitcoin, that, and then looking for new projects that have charts that look like this, that have charts that look like this, that are just kind of generally trending upwards, that don't have baggage, that haven't been around a cycle. And, this is what I'm paying attention to. So, I don't know. I kind of think that's it. I'm not going to get too much into anything else, macro wise yet. Kind of just to recap, let's go back to the daily here real quick. Clearly we're at resistance here on this 35K level. It's probably going to be a minute before we break that. I think that, again, the ETF announcement notwithstanding, but, outside of that, I think there's a lot of resistance to get through here. I mean, if you look at this on the weekly chart, this is kind of getting back into a lot of trading activity, both here and in here. And so mega resistance here. Let's look at the volume profile. It's funny. That doesn't actually, probably because we didn't spend a ton of time there. But nevertheless, there's a lot of trading activity here that it's got to work its way through. There's, probably let's see, what would that look like? Let's look at the monthly real quick. I know I said I was wrapping up, but let's just briefly touch on, okay, so we got this level here. That's resistance. Obviously the next level up is going to be this level here, 38,000. And then kind of this range here at 45,000. So yeah, I think what's probably going to happen is I'm going to end up drawing a new range here. Once this month closes, in a couple of days, what I'm going to be looking for is I'm going to just kind of nuke this range here. I'm going to redraw this using this as the bottom. And, Well, here, let's just do it right now. So I'd be looking at like this for the range. And so if we go switch that back to like a daily, here's what that would look like. Which kind of makes sense. And so what you'd want to see, you know, here's the previous range. Now these are basically bumping up here as resistance. They kind of had some false breaks, you know, ultimately broke down, never really punched through. Now it's punched through all the way to the top, no less, all the way to that next level up. So let me get rid of this line here. So yeah, this is kind of what I'm looking at for the range that we're basically in, sort of on the daily level. Yeah, here's the middle of the range. Obviously, be nice to see if it holds that as support, but I'm not going to be surprised to see if it does kind of come back down into this area here. So here's what I'm looking for on Bitcoin. That's my new range. All right. So yeah, I think that's it for today. We'll see what things look like on Thursday and go from there. So have a